Hello everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be going over the top 10 cards for Psychic GLC decks. The way I want to talk about this is not necessarily how good they are within Psychic, although that is certainly a big factor, but also if they were in another type, how good they would be. It'll make more sense when I explain that pretty much good cards are on this list. And these also play in Psychic decks, not like the same deck, and a few of these have fallen off. Some are more specific as well. And we'll talk about them. The list is in order, but don't worry about the order too much, as you can certainly change things up. Also, there aren't any honorable mentions. If you would be interested in me adding honorable mentions, I could as well. I guess I'll actually say a few. There's a Tinkaton, which is kind of good, but not here. There are a bunch of big basics. There's a Mewtwo, and there's a Mewtwo, which Mewtwo is very good. I'll say Mewtwo is very good, but it's very new and hasn't seen a ton of play. Same thing with Necrozma. I'm personally not a big fan of the like special energy special energy based deck as well. There's a deck, a psychic based or a psychic deck that has a lot of special energy. That's not my personal favorite. I think a lot of these cards are pretty universal and generally applicable, but if you are more specific, there's like a spread card or a few spread cards on here. And we'll talk about them when we get to them. But first of all, we have Mimikyu here from is that Burning Shadows? I don't know. I don't know. For some reason, I just don't know this era of the set logos from this year very well. But yeah, Mimikyu here. The main attack, unsurprisingly, is going to be Copycat. If one of your opponent's Pokemon, or sorry, if your opponent's Pokemon used an attack that isn't a GX attack during their last turn, use it as this attack. This is really good. If your opponent is using a powerful attack, especially an expensive attack, because this is not a very expensive attack, it's only 2 energy on a basic Pokemon, so you can power this up extremely easily. And it's really nice. I don't actually have Zadu on this list. Zadu's really good. It's, again, very new and not super synergistic with the psychic type, but it's very good, useful with this. But psychic energy getting 2 on is very easy, and you can just hit for big damage. It's just a nice little attacker. I put it in over the big attackers that are like more expensive because it's very reliable. It's not as powerful, especially if your opponent is doing some of the more unique and niche attacks. For example, I know there's certain like setup attacks or acceleration attacks that you don't necessarily want to be using in your deck, or they could be doing like spread and you're doing big damage, or vice versa. If they're doing big damage and you're doing spread, it might not be perfect, but for the most part, it's very powerful and good in high number of scenarios. There's a card similar that we're actually going to talk about soon that, in my opinion, is almost directly better than Mimikyu. Not the same, but I'd say it's better. But Mimikyu is still incredibly powerful, coming in at number 10. Also, one of the slots actually has 2 cards. We'll talk about that. Next up, in number 9, we have Mismagius. I think this is probably the most controversial card in this list, but it's very good. Eerie Voice for 2 Psychic, put 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. There was a Meloetta that I was considering putting here. There also isn't a Zelf, but I don't think the Azelf or Azelf is particularly good. But the Meloetta is okay, very similar level, but it's a basic. But Mismagius has this insane ability, despite full magic. If this Pokemon's at full HP and one-shotted, then by damage, then you put 8 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. That is obviously a lot. So you're going to be hitting 60 damage at least with this attack, probably more. And obviously this isn't a spread-based deck, but you also are doing big damage when you're hit into. I mean, you're doing 80, assuming you're getting one-shotted, and if you're not, you're just attacking again. It's also only 1 energy. It's, in my opinion, one of the best stage 1 single energy attackers in the game. I put it over something like Baynet because it's just really good. I mean, Baynet I was considering, but I really don't think it belongs here. It is very weak in terms of HP. But this Magius can, it does big damage across the board. Right? It's a really great spread attacker. There are some that are a little bit better, but for the most part, Miss Magius is pretty insane because, as I said, it spreads a lot and it does you can attack hopefully multiple turns, right? If you get this up early, there's actually a card Duskstone, which has synergy with this as well. It's not a broken card by any means because it's pretty much only good with this. There's the Chandelure, there are some other cards it works with, but most Mismagius, that's what you're targeting. But it's still incredibly powerful because you can just spread a decent chunk. And if your opponent, as I said, it's easy to set up. And so if you set up before your opponent's ready, then you can just completely decimate their board. They'll struggle to deal with it because 90 is certainly not nothing. Turn 2, it's hard to hit. It's not super hard to hit, but it's not always hittable, certainly. And you want to be focused on setting up at that point. So, this can be really devastating. I'm a big fan of Psychic Spread as well, and it's the best like pure spread Psychic Pokemon. There are some that are fit into spread and not spread, but This is the best pure Psychic spread Pokemon, in my opinion. Next up, number 8 here, we have Nihilego. This one is a really good Pokemon. It has, first of all, Void Tentacles for one Psychic on a basic. Your opponent's active is now confused and poisoned. This is really nice, obviously, in certain scenarios because it can buy you time potentially and annoy your opponent and do some damage. It's not super powerful by any means, but it is something you will use, a nice backup option. And it's very cheap. It's obviously not what you play it for, though. What you play it for is the attack and Nightcap. You can only use this if your opponent has exactly 2 prizes remaining. Choose one of your opponent's Pokemon and use it as this attack. This is a really good Ultra Beast, better than, there are actually 3 Psychic Ultra Beasts, or before, I guess, I believe. There is a Naganadel, which is not on this list, which I think is not quite as good synergistically with Psychic. Um, it was good in Standard, but not in not in Psychic GLC. But Nightcap here is insane. It is obviously a specific turn, a late game turn, but you can use any of your opponent's Pokemon's attacks, and so that's a lot of options. Mimikyu is only one specific attack that your opponent used last turn, which could be completely useless or pretty underwhelming if it's like, oh, you discard energy of like water energy or something, then yeah, that's not so good. But Nihilego you can choose, and presumably your opponent will have some attack that either one-shots their active or it does spread if you're on a spread-based list. Honestly, it's just an insane attack because, as I said, there are so many options for it. It's really good. Aside from that, it obviously, there are certain scenarios when it's not great. I mean, it's only good on one turn, potentially two if your opponent, if you're able to like do something weird, but still, it's definitely one of my favorite cards. I'm a big fan of Ultra Beasts, and it's a good Ultra Beast, and yeah, I mean it's one energy, which is really nice. Next up, we have Garbodor. There are actually 2 Garbodors that are essentially the same, but I guess they're both here. They're pretty much the same. But if it has a tool attached, you turn off all abilities from Pokemon other than Gerbotoxin itself. Obviously, that wouldn't really make a lot of sense. The attack is kind of useless, but this is obviously really powerful because Ability Lock is really good. There's also a Wobbuffet. I put Garbodor over Wobbuffet. I could see it going either way. They're kind of similar. Um, Garbodor does not need to be in the active though, but it does turn off your own abilities. And generally, you won't play obviously a lot of abilities if you are running this, but it's really good because obviously it allows you to ability lock, and it's not that hard to do. A stage 1 with the tool isn't too bad. As I said, there's another one as well that was like kind of the same, which is fine. It doesn't matter too much for this. I think this one's better, but anyway, yeah, I mean it's just really good though because ability lock is really powerful, and yeah, there's not really too much to say about this card. It's really good. It's not good for every psychic list because it ability locks herself, but I wouldn't worry about that too much. Most of these Pokemon on this list do not have abilities. A few do, and some of the best ones do. We talked about Miss Magus, which does, which is nice. You would never play these together though, because they just aren't really synergistic. Garbodor is more focused on that straightforward attacking, I guess, a beat stick style deck, as some may call it, where you just have a big attacker that does good damage, and often basics or stage 1s, or it could be stage 2s, but you just hit good damage. Next up, I believe this is number 6, we have Sableye. And Sableye is very powerful because, that might not have been, no, this is 6. Sableye is really good. Lost Mine, you can only use this if you have 10 or more cards in the Lost Zone. You put 12 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like for only 1 Psychic Energy, which is just absurd. It's very good. Obviously, it's a lot of setup. It's a very hard card to use. I was considering not putting it on this list because I'm not a massive fan of the deck, but I know it's really good, so I kind of had to put it on. You can also copy this with the Mew from Fates Collide, I think. Fates Collided, I think it's Fates Collide. It's pretty good. We're going to talk about another Mew that's also really good, but that Mew is arguably, it's certainly good with Sableye and a few other basic attackers, so you can copy it. Sableye is obviously really powerful here because it's 120 for 1. Even if it's just 120 for 1 to your points active, that would be kind of broken. We see cards like Zapdos, Hoopa, and some other ones. Spiritomb, kind of similar. These basic Pokemon that hit big damage for 1 energy. Sableye does that, but it can spread any way you want. You can play this in a spread-based deck. You can play this in like just a normal deck, but you need to get lots of cards in the Lost Zone. So when I say a normal deck, I mean it can be like normal attackers, but with Lost Zone focus. It's the big issue obviously is getting the cards in the Lost Zone. So you need to play a lot of things to focus on that. You need to play supportive using. You need to use Colorless Experiment a lot, and you need to also play Comfy, Lost Vacuum, Lost Blender, and other things. And Lost Zone stuff can be sketchy as well. Comfy Lost Zones 1 So you look at two essentially random cards from your deck, the top two cards, and you have to lost zone one of them, which is obviously nice for getting cards in the lost zone, but you will almost definitely end up being hurt a little bit from that because you're going to at some point in the game hit two cards that are pretty nice for you, and you're going to have to lose one permanently, which is not great. But for the most part, this attack is just absurdly good when it's active. So once it's active, it's probably the best attack in the game. But yeah, we'll talk about this attack a little more later. I think you know where this is going for those of you who play GLC, but Sabai is pretty good. Next up, we have Malamar. This one I wasn't exactly sure where to put. This is also a card that we've seen in a lot of other types. We saw Flaffy, Mareep, no, Flaffy, Electric, Bronzong, and a few other cards that are similar, but those are essentially all the same. Uh, once during your turn, you can accelerate a basic energy, in this case a Psychic, from your discard to one of your benched Pokemon. This is obviously kind of absurd because it just lets you accelerate a ton of energy. It is here above Xatu, one, because Xatu is really new, but two, because it's I mean, you can just get energy super reliably in the mid to late game. Even the early game, you can kind of do it, but mid to late game, it's insane. There's a Pokemon that I completely forgot about, which is Giratina. It is pretty good with this Malamar. It like recovers itself. It's spread. It doesn't see a ton of play right now, but it's pretty good. And you can use that. Malamar here, however, it's really good because it gets you just lots of energy. It's the most reliable form of energy. Xatu needs energy in your hand. It's good when you have energy in your hand. It's much better than Malamar, but you certainly won't always have that. You will almost always have energy in the discard, so you can use this. It's really good in like the more more just attacker, biggish attacker focused decks. It's usually the first turn form of energy acceleration you'll turn to because it is nice and it's pretty reliable. And yeah, I mean, there's not too much to say about it other than it's really good. It's really good in every type it's in, which is lightning, metal, and this type. It's also in a few other types, kind of, but not completely. But metal, lightning, and psychic, it's really good in all of them. I mean, metal's not that good. I don't know exactly. I'm pretty sure they play it. There's a bunch of really good bronze songs, but I think they play that one. But yeah, this Malamar is really interesting, really powerful, and it's just really good. I didn't say this earlier as well. Psychic's probably the best type, not necessarily in GLC, but like in general, it just gets the best cards, and it's certainly potentially the best type in GLC. Next up, though, we have Mew from Unbroken Bonds. This one might be a little bit of a hot take, but it's really good. Bench Barrier, prevent all damage done to your bench Pokemon from your opponent's attacks. I could also see an argument that Mr. Mime is better, which actually has more HP, but Mew actually has a very usable attack. Psi Power, put 3 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. This can come in super clutch or just be kind of fine. It's certainly not a bad one energy attack. It's pretty usable. Not what you're relying on. I mean, we talked about Sabai, but that was 12 as opposed to 3. But this can certainly be useful in certain scenarios, and it's a nice backup option. But Bench Bear here doing just being a big shield to your bench is so nice. Psychic doesn't always need it and doesn't always play it certainly because spread isn't a massive thing. There was a Kyogre Amazing Rare that was very good that got banned, so that's kind of weird. But there are a lot of good spread decks. There are some that use damage counters. Psychic often does use damage counters, so that doesn't stop that. But regular damage from there's Raikou Amazing Rare. Um, there's some colorless stuff. I don't know. There's a bunch of spread Pokemon, and this stops most of them, if not all of them, like all the damage ones. And obviously, don't play this with Garbodor if you want to actually use it. But it's a really powerful card, and it's pretty annoying for some decks to deal with. I mean, it just wins certain matchups. So it's incredibly powerful to have this as an option. Only 3 types have a regular bench barrier, like a basic bench barrier, and Psychic has 2. Has 2 bench barrier cards, which is nice. You would never really play both. You could if you really have to, which is kind of weird, but if you really want to, you can. And Mew, in my opinion, is the better one. I could see the argument for Mr. Mime, which, as I said, has 70 HP, which is more, but its attack is worse. I honestly don't remember what its attack is. Is it like some confusion? I misspelled that. There we go. Mr. Mime from, what is this it? Yeah. Oh, 20 for 2 psychic and coin flip paralysis. Okay. Yeah, this is better. The other Mr. Mime does still have a retreat cost of 1. They're very similar cards. I do think Mew is slightly better, but it's completely up to you. But I think having a bench barrier cards is just absurd. Not all types have it. As I said, most types don't. Only 3 do have like a regular bench barrier Pokemon, but Mew is just I mean, it's really good. It's something that every type would love to have. This is I mentioned that like, oh, it's based on how good the type is within Psychic, but also how good it would be in other types. Mew is a great example of that. Every type would love to have Mew. It's just super valuable, a super great resource. Not necessarily something you play. You don't have to play it, but it's a really great plan and super like it literally just wins matchups on its own essentially in a few of them. Next up, we have number 3, Marshadow here. Marshadow, I hope I have the right number cards. Marshadow with Let Loose is absurd. It's banned and expanded. Oh, what did I click on? Yeah, I don't need. Okay. So Let Loose, when you play this from your hand onto your bench, you may have each player shuffle their hand into the deck and draw 4. It's a bit of a hard card to use because you only can only play one copy. But that being said, it's like absolutely absurd because forcing your opponent's hand down to 4 or drawing 4 cards. It's very similar. It's the same as Judge. Um, and Judge is really good. It's not a broken supporter, but it's a very good supporter. And this is like Judge, except it's like a Pokemon on playability, which is probably better. You can reuse this as well with Scoop Up Net and potentially other things. So that's really nice. And you can do this turn 1 as well to disrupt your opponent. Red card is in the format. It doesn't really see any play, but you know, you could use it. You can use this as early disruption. You can also use this as there are a lot of uses. It's really good. It can bail you out of bad scenarios. It's essentially the only Pokemon like this in the format, I believe. It's kind of like a card like Lumineon V, Tapu Lele GX, Crobat V, Dedenne GX, Shaymin EX, all these like broken Pokemon that you can just search your deck for and bail you out of a bad hand. Marshadow can do that. As I said, you only can obviously run one copy, but like a lot of people use that to criticize it. But I mean that's true with literally every card in the whole format. That's the whole point of it. Yeah, Marshadow is really good. You get to you just it's really good. I think every type would love this. I considered putting it up to number 1, honestly. Um, I couldn't quite put it there. The top card, Psychic is such a loaded type, but Marshadow is really good, a really great utility card. It's played in pretty much every Psychic deck. Obviously, it's only like a one-time value card, so that's why it's a little lower, but it can still be super powerful. Next up, number 2, we have Blacephalon. Blacephalon with its attack here, Fireworks Bomb. First of all, it's an Ultra Beast. Obviously, it's the best Ultra Beast. Fireworks Bomb for Psychic Colors. Put 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like, which isn't terrible. I talked about Mew, which is 3 for 1, so this is like worse than that, but it is something you will use from time to time. It's not absolutely terrible. But if your opponent has exactly 3 prize cards remaining, you put 12 damage counters on them instead, which is like Sablai's attack. Except you don't need 10 cards in the Lost Zone. It is 2 energy, which is a little awkward, but it's just so good. I mean, the attack, as I said with Sableye, is really good, and just it's really disruptive and really difficult to deal with. You can't really spam it much, if at all, because obviously you can probably only use it once, maybe twice. But it's also like absurdly good because the attack's absurdly good. Not as good as Sableye. It is 2 energy, but not too difficult to pay, and there are ways to accelerate. Especially this is like a later game card, and you're not devoting your deck to putting cards in the Lost Zone. So it's really good. In my opinion, it's one of the best attackers in the whole format. I'm a big fan of Ultra Beast, in case you can't tell. But it's probably it's like the second best one, maybe behind Guzzlord. It's pretty similar in play, it's very defining of its type, very good attacker, kind of all-in attacker as well. It's different than Guzzlord, but in my opinion, kind of similar. They're Ultra Beasts, they're good. Yeah. And it's really good though. It as I said, 120 damage is pretty good. It is 2 energy this case, but that's still pretty decent. But then it is spread, right? So you can get really good value. You can probably KO a few bench Pokemon. Psychic spread's a serious deck. You can't really play Sableye in a pure spread. Like if you're playing Miss Mages, you could play Sableye, but you don't have a lot of options in your deck because you're taking up a lot of deck space and time to set up Sableye. That's not true with Blacephalon. Blacephalon, you're not setting up your whole game around Blacephalon, but it is something that is really nice. Your opponent can't really skip it as they couldn't like standard or expanded traditionally, because obviously they're probably taking one prize at a time. So they will have this 3 prize turn, which you can take advantage of. And if they don't knock it out, they probably will. They're a pretty good way into the game at this point. But if you're able to like gust them up or like disrupt them with Marshadow, right? You do these plays together, you just can completely destroy their board state because attacking twice with this is insanely good. As I said, it's pretty awkward to do, but it's certainly not impossible. It will happen. If you get that, you're probably going to win the game, to be honest, because this means that you've trapped something which isn't attacking. And so now you can just knock out their attacker or their engine. You can pretty much always knock out their engine with this, as the highest HP engines would be 120, but a lot are like 80. And so you can take 2 prizes with this. I mean, the attack's really good, and it's not something that requires you to build your whole deck around it. Same arguments for Sabai, except it's just better in most cases. Not all cases. Sabai is better when it's working, but it's much harder to use. Cephalon is so good. There are a lot of good Ultra Beasts, but Cephalon is arguably the best. Not a complete deck build around, and it's really high value. But number 1 is actually 2 Pokemon. I said there were 2 Pokemon. These are all technically evolution lines. So I'd be like, oh, it's the whole evolution line. I mean, there are different Garbodors you could play, but the top one is Curly Gallade, and I guess Gardevoir if you want to play that, but probably not. Gallade lets you search for a supporter every turn, and also Swirling Slice 160 for Psychic Colorless, and move an energy from this Pokemon to your bench Pokemon. You'd probably rather not move the energy, as things can go wrong when that happens, but it's not like that much of a downside. You can just reversal and pay this on one turn, or you can like do other ways. It's 2 colors, so it's extremely easy to pay. Use double colorless, double turbo, and of course you have like Malamar, you have Zadu, which I mentioned, which you can play. Although Curly does kind of replace it because its ability is a discard 1, draw 2. It's insane. One of the best draw abilities ever. I mean, it's not like super broken. We've seen stuff that's stronger, but historically, this ability has been very solid. Curlia, it's been very solid on Curlia, and post rotation and standard, it's actually going to be like super broken. But right now, we're not talking about standard, we're talking about GLC. And I mean, it's really good, right? It's lovable, searchable, which is nice. It's not a massive deal, but it is nice. And the Ralts has an okay attack. It evolves into the Gallade. There's a few Gardevoirs that are actually really nice as well. There is one from Chilling Reign, which draws, and it's essentially Curly with no downside. Not the refinement one, but the one with Shiny Arcana and something. I don't remember what the ability is. Or is the ability Shiny Arcana? I'm going to find that out. But I guess I should pull it up as well. It's pretty important. And it is here. No, it is. There we go. The ability is Shiny Arcana, and then the attack is Brainwave. There we go. And so it lets you draw and potentially accelerate, but mostly just draw, which is nice. It is also an attacker, but Gallade is just absurd as well. So you probably want to play that, but you can play both. You can't evolve into both. Obviously, you only have one Curlia, but well, you could technically get both into play. Anyways, realistically, though, the idea is you go get Curlia, draw your cards all game. Then you have this Gallade, which is arguably a little worse than Curlia in certain scenarios, but in certain scenarios, it's really good in every scenario as well, because it gets you any supporter you want from your entire deck, which is just absurd, because you have obviously a diversity of supporters. All the supporters are different. You have like Boss and Guzma, which are really important late game. So this is super clutch late game. Pretty much no other type has ability lock to the same level as Psychic, so you won't ability lock yourself, obviously, and then you'll just win. You have a good attack, good HP. This is just an absurd Pokemon. Curly and Gallade are really good. They've gotten so much love, as well as Gardevoir itself. They've gotten so much love over the years. Not in like a weird way, but like in a way that's like, no, they just had some really, really absurdly good cards over the years, and these 2 are insane. They're the best line in GLC, certainly. I don't know if they're the best cards, but they're certainly up there. Curlia, we've seen other cards like it, notably Chinchino, which is really nice, which is also arguably it's better. I mean, it is better. It is does have a usable attack and has more HP and a lower retreat cost, but it's on a worse type slightly, historically worse at least. Arguably it's on colorless. Arguably colorless is better now, but anyway, and then Gallade is really good, right? Because obviously, good attacker. I said all this stuff. But overall, what are your thoughts on this? I think Psychic is the coolest type. It's the best type in GLC, has the most cards, in some sense that makes it the coolest. It's not my favorite. My favorite type is Lightning, but it's still a really cool type, and one that I think is really fun to mess around with because there are a lot of different options. I'm a big fan of Spread. I'm a big fan of, obviously, the Ultra Beasts, which are pretty good in pretty much every Psychic deck. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Comment down below what other Pokemon you would put on this list. But I hope you enjoyed, and I'm excited to see you in the next video. Also, subscribe.